Hi, I'm Pastor Kurt, and this is your 5-minute Bible study. Today, we're going to look at John chapter 21, verses 1 through 25. Now, this final chapter in the Gospel of John is important, but it also kind of feels like a bonus chapter. In a way, it feels like one of those post-credit scenes in a movie, because at the end of chapter 20, it sounds like everything gets wrapped up. We get some verses that sound very much like a conclusion to the story, but the story's not done yet. We get this extra chapter. We get this bonus chapter. Well, what happens in this chapter? Why is this particular scene important? Well, in the previous chapter, chapter 20, the risen Christ appeared to the disciples in one occasion that Thomas was absent. He then appears a second time when Thomas is present. So these disciples have seen the risen Christ. Now, in this scene, the disciples are back out on the water. They're fishing. This is something familiar to many of them. They then see this person out on the shore, and he's calling to them, asking them if they've caught anything. Well, this should sound really, really familiar, because it's very much like when Jesus called the fishermen to follow him that first time. They were out on the water, there he was, calling them to follow, and in a way, that's what's happening here too. He's calling them to follow. Now, what's interesting is that at first, they don't seem to recognize him, even though they recognized him right in the previous chapter. This is why this kind of feels like a bonus chapter or an added-on story. Well, eventually they realize, yes, this is Jesus. They just don't come out and say, hey, it's Jesus standing over there. What they do is they take their fish and they bring it back to shore. They then end up having breakfast there on the shore with Jesus, and he eats some of it. This eating of the fish is a way to remind them, like, hey, I am physically present here with you, okay? I'm not a ghost, right? Ghosts can't eat. So he has this meal with them. Then he has this conversation with Peter. Now, remember, the last time that we heard about Peter, specifically Peter, was when he denied Jesus. The last time that Peter saw Jesus, Peter's like, I won't deny you. And Jesus is like, yes, you will. Well, now they see each other again. And Peter has denied Jesus, and both of them know that. What's going to happen? Is Jesus going to tell Peter, I told you so? No, that's not how Jesus behaves. Instead, he asks Peter, do you love me? And Peter responds, yeah, of course, you know I love you. And Jesus says, well, feed my sheep. Then he asks him again, do you love me? Peter says, yes, of course, I love you. You just asked me that, and I already answered it. Jesus again tells him to take care of his sheep. And it happens a third time. And the text even says that Peter was like, okay, why are you asking me this 3 times? Well, why is he asking Peter this 3 times? Think about how Peter denied Jesus. He denied him 3 times. It's almost like this threefold question of, do you love me, is making up for the threefold denial. Peter confesses that he loves Jesus, which is true. He does. We can see that in their relationship. Peter's the guy who often speaks before he thinks and who puts his foot in his mouth a lot. But he's got a really big heart. He really does. He does love Jesus, and Jesus knows this. So in a way, he is calling Peter to follow again. Remember, this is very much like a call story. And he calls Peter to tend to Jesus' sheep, which is great, right? Peter, I haven't given up on you. I can still work through you. I still have something important for you to do in this world. which is wonderful. It's probably a big sigh of relief for Peter that Jesus hasn't turned his back on him, which of course Jesus wouldn't do, right? But Peter probably still had that fear in him. Peter then turns and sees that the beloved disciple is there. And he kind of asks Jesus, well, what about the beloved disciple? And Jesus kind of answers Peter and is like, don't worry about the beloved disciple. You just focus on what I'm calling you to do. In our lives, even when we deny Jesus, even when we don't always make the best choices, even when we don't admit that we're his disciples, Jesus still gives us a second chance to. He still allows us to continue to follow him. And sometimes we look around and we see, okay, well, what about these other people? That doesn't matter, right? Jesus will take care of them. Jesus will call them and give them a second chance too. But their story is secondary to your call story. Don't worry about how other people are called to follow Jesus. Instead, listen to how he calls you to follow. This is a wonderful added chapter to the Gospel of John because it reminds us that Jesus gave those original disciples second chances and he gives us second chances too. There's your 5-minute Bible study. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.